there were just so many players selected who took part. You could clearly see it elevated their stock from their time in Mobile. So, what do you think it says again about the success of the event, the importance of the event during the whole draft process?
Well, thanks for saying that, Rob. Yeah, it's continuing to build. We've seen that over the last 6 years. So to have the most players we've ever had, 110, and just as importantly as the overall number, having 10 first-round picks, and then 45 of the top 100, 65 in the first 4 rounds. Again, I always love to bring it back to the players. It was them realizing their dreams, and we all get lost in all the entertainment value out of their whole process. But I do need to give a lot of credit to our scouting staff. Did a great job this year. But it's everybody. It's everybody at the Senior Bowl that kind of pours into these players. I mean, Dave Rogers and Johnny Williams that do all our social media stuff, all the graphics year round, that they're doing, like help recruit these players here. And I just spoke at something this afternoon. That's why I got a coat on. But like all our community volunteers that touch these players when they come to Mobile, and just treat them right, put on a great show every year, because our players are going to go back to next year's crew and talk about their experience here in Mobile. So yeah, it's a big team effort, big family effort. The weekend was a lot of fun.
Let's get on to the Seahawks draft class then, because 6 of the 8 players taken were participants in the Senior Bowl. Before we get on to the 6th, though, would it be possible to get a quick thought on Byron Murphy? You previously compared him to Grady Jarrett. What do you think about that selection at number 16?
Yeah, sore subject, Rob. Right off the bat, you're hitting me with a sore subject that we had.
Sorry.
That we had Byron coming to Mobile, and he didn't end up coming here. But no, really, really good player. It's cool to see. It was cool to see the Seahawks kind of stick to their board. I'm guessing. I didn't get to look at their board, but it wasn't a glaring need area with Jay Reed and Leonard Williams and Jones and the guys they've got up there on the defensive line. I mean, you can always use D linemen, but it just shows me that they maybe ignored some greater needs and picked the guy they felt was the best player. So really impactful guy. It's going to be hard to keep that guy out of an early rotation, man. He is a really good football player. He's ready to go. He's instinctive. He's powerful. He's quick, disruptive. I mean, they added a really good player. They added a Pro Bowl level player. So that's it's always a good first round.
And then Christian Haynes, he just looks exactly the kind of player that they needed for their offensive line. How do you sort of see him fitting in? And what is he going to bring to Seattle based on your study and your time with him at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, a little different than what they've been drafting, right? I mean, since I left there 6 years ago, they went big. When Tom Cable was there, we were looking for more zone scheme, undersized athletic guys that could get wide and get out in space. And then when I left, they got big. They got a new offensive line coach in. They're just trying to find big old dudes that could play square and knock you off the ball. And I think Christian's a little bit of both. I do think he's, he and Graham Barton are probably the best, zone scheme, lateral movers, probably in this draft, at the interior position. So a guy that should start right away. Again, I don't work for the team, but I would have a hard time thinking he won't start over the guys they currently have on the depth chart. So to get an immediate day one starter is great value. And what this guy's going to do in the run game for them at the second level and backside and creating cutback opportunities, because I thought he was the best backside blocker in this year's draft too. So just in a tough dude. He's a tough dude. I mean, there was some scraps here in Mobile, and there's no back down to this kid, man. He's played a ton of football, so there was like no development left to do. I mean, the guys started 40 some games or whatever it was. So yeah, man, I thought they nailed it with that one.
Yeah. And one other thing on him quickly, watching him, there were some games that kind of got away from Connecticut at times, but it was interesting to watch him, despite the scoreline being heavily weighted against his team. He's still really going at it. Like it was a 3-3 game or something, like in the third quarter when the scoreline's weighted against him. What do you think that says about his mentality and sort of his commitment to the game, that he was still going all out in a lost cause?
That's good scouting, Rob. That's exactly what that's the stuff that scouts dig into right there. You look at those lopsided games, rivalry games. I mean, there's always stuff to be taken out of different situations, but yeah, absolutely. Competitive guy, man. UConn hasn't been like a huge factory over the years, and but he's super competitive, just like coming down here. Like I said, there was some heated was a couple of heated practices. And I know the big one on social media was when Jordan Jefferson ripped his helmet off and like threw it at him. But there was more. It was more than just that one rep. I mean, it was they were getting after it pretty good, and Christian was up to the task.
The selection of Tyrese Knight has generated a lot of discussion amongst fans and media alike. What did you see from him, both in terms of tape study and his time in Mobile?
Yeah, I'm just going to refer you back to the thread I did on Tyrese Knight back in the fall during the college season. What I saw, I was on another show locally in Seattle today, and they brought that up that I didn't realize. I've tried to stay off my phone the last few days and kind of recharge, but I don't know. I don't know why that pick has been, people have viewed it a certain way. I just know he's a really instinctive guy that can run. He's a super productive guy, always around the ball, high character guy. He was one of the guys, like the one-on-one periods, all that stuff gets highlighted coming out of Senior Bowl, and it's great. That stuff's really fun to watch. But I think when you watch, the team stuff and the 9-on-7 inside run stuff is when you really saw this guy's instinct. So just a highly instinctive, high character guy that runs, mid 4.5s. That's and is always around the football. So to me, that's in the 4th round. The guy that's going to come in and push for a starting job is a 4th round pick. That's job well done.
In particular, just quickly on linebackers, are there certain things that when you're watching a linebacker, you sort of think, I need to see that, to like this guy, whether it's a particular trait or a playing style or something, Jim, that you say that is what I'm looking for in a linebacker?
Well, I would say the first thing is instincts. I think it's such an instinctive position. I think you can compensate for a lack of pure foot speed if you're seeing it and reacting quicker. And it's great when you have 4 or 5 speed on top of that. But I would say right now, like beyond the instincts part, it's just the mover. And is he going to have the movement skills, change of direction wise to match up in space with people? If not, we're talking about a 2-down player and special teams guy. So, and that's a dying breed. So, and Tyrese has got that. I saw him week 0 live against Jacksonville State. Drove 10 hours round trip just to see that UTEP team play when they came here to the state of Alabama. So, but yeah, I would say that, man, is just the movement athlete. And, can he bend? Can he change direction? Can he stop and start? All those things.
AJ Barner sounds extremely determined and driven based on his media conference that he did after being selected in round 4. What do you think the Seahawks like about him in that early day 3 range, which they took him?
Yeah, I thought AJ made a huge jump this year. I thought he's one of the most improved players that we had into the game. I got a lot of calls over the summer from agents like I do asking me about Barner, and I told them, like, probably not going to be here, unless he'd have to improve a ton to get a Senior Bowl invite. And I felt like he did. He had a really good all-around year. He's a guy that projects as probably a really solid number 2 tight end that can do everything, right? He's got the size and the frame to play on the line of scrimmage. He will fight you. So he's good in the run game. And then as a pass catcher, like, he made some really cool adjustments on the ball. When you go back and watch, I really noticed it again when I was going back and watching some of McCarthy's stuff. This guy can make some adjustments on, back shoulder balls and that a lot of guys can't make. So to me, he's kind of what they've played with. They've had really good role players at tight end, Will Dissly's and guys like that. I think AJ's going to have a role for him.
It's not often you get the opportunity to draft 2 players at the same position from the same school, but that's what they've done with the 2 cornerbacks with Pritchett and James. It's going to be a very competitive defensive back group during camp. Why do you think this pair stood out to the Seahawks on day 3?
I think they, again, not knowing their board, I would just think those 2 guys were probably sticking out. Knowing where we had them graded. I mean, I thought those guys were going to, at one point a couple of years ago when they were thinking about coming out, we offered them last year. So we offered them last year, and they both went back to school for NIL money. And I thought they would be like fringe day 2, day 3 guys, fringe top 100. And so for them to go, I don't think corner was a glaring need for Seattle, but for them to go back to back, which tells me they just thought they were getting great value there. So, Nehemiah is your classic Seattle corner, 6-footer that can really run, 4.3 guy. biggest area of improvement for him this year was just finishing. Questioned ball skills early on, last 3 years, and had a really big Senior Bowl week. Another guy I thought more people would talk about after going back and watching the tape. I'm like, why aren't people talking about this guy more? And then DJ is a guy that I grew up, the kid grew up down here. I watched him play high school football. We do this thing down here in Mobile, Alabama called our Future Prospects team. We started doing that DJ's senior year of high school. He's on the inaugural Future Prospect team. And then he ended up here in the Senior Bowl, and we just threw a big draft party for him. We posted a video about, he was like our VIP, our guest of honor at our draft party last Thursday night. And again, different, can play inside, outside. I think he could play. I'm guessing they'll try him at nickel, just because of the change of direction skills and ability to match up with people in man coverage. And yeah, I think both those guys are NFL players. I know it's going to be a deep and competitive situation, but I think both those guys are going to play in the league a long time.
Apologies if I mispronounced the next name. So Sataoa Laumea certainly plays with a physical edge, doesn't he? He's. Do you sort of see his best fit as a guard? Can he play tackle? And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, when a player has played exclusively on the right side in his college career, what is it like transitioning to the left if a team said, we'd like you to try and play left guard, or we'd like you to try and play different positions? What is that like for an offensive lineman?
Yeah. Glad you bring him up. That's another guy that I thought would be more buzz about, honestly. I try to promote our guys that have good weeks here in Mobile, and I hope the best for all these guys, right? But you kind of run out of days in the pre-draft process. But I thought Laumea had a really good week down here against a good D-line crew. You're talking about like Michael Hall and Dwayne Carter. I mean, there was some Brandon Dorless. I mean, there were some good guys they went up against every day in practice. And I'll take it all the way back to last fall. I just thought he was easy. He was easy for me to like. That guy was an easy Senior Bowl invite. We watched like 2 games, and I really think his best football is at guard. Going back to your question, I think his highest upside is a guard, but I thought he was a starter. I thought he's a starter level player, just like I did Haynes. We honestly didn't have them separated on the board too much at all. Those guys were pretty close to each other. And again, I thought like second level, I thought he made things look easy. Like I thought the guy, athletically at least, just climbing up to the second level and blocking linebackers, I mean, thought he did a really nice job. So yeah, and then the right left thing, I always use these, O-line coaches always say, try brushing your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed. It feels pretty awkward. So it's not as easy as what the average person thinks. I never played O-line. I can imagine I probably would have struggled with it. But again, it's muscle memory and reps, and hopefully he'll get some over there and they can make him, a utility guy. And who knows, maybe he's in the mix for a starting job. I know that as a new coaching staff coming in, they're probably going to preach competitiveness, just like, Pete did when he got to Seattle. I'm sure they're going to get back to that. There's not a lot of guys in like established roles right now. They're up front. They're probably moving some pieces around. So again, I sound like a broken record, but I'm just going off where we had these guys graded, man. We had all these guys like 4th round or higher, including those 2 corners.
Was there anything in the 2024 draft in general that sort of made you raise an eyebrow, that you found interesting, that had you sort of talking over the course of the 3 days, Jim?
Spencer Rattler falling in the 5th round. That had me scratching my, but there wasn't a lot, honestly, Rob. That's a good question. I think teams are everyone's more invested in the scouting process. You're not seeing teams make mistakes. You're not seeing teams go rogue a lot. I mean, there was a couple teams that, I questioned some of the stuff they did, but for the most part, now that everyone's kind of, everyone's wrapping analytics in, you're seeing less mistakes. I think the board's coming off a lot cleaner. We used to call those upsets in Seattle. I'm sure they still do on draft week. And I used to have to, track the upset. So like John would know how the board's falling. And there's just, it's coming off cleaner. It's making it harder for these teams to get guys late that are going to slip through the cracks. There's not a lot of slipping through the cracks anymore.
I wasn't going to ask about this, but as soon as you brought it, what is it like in a draft room, over the course of those 3 days, especially when those upsets start happening and you maybe have to adapt and adjust to what other teams are doing?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely varies by team, and your GM's the tone setter for that room. There's no question. So, like in Seattle, it was great. There was always a good vibe in there. It's a very inclusive process. That's why people want to work there. Scouts want to work in Seattle, man. They want to work for John. He's very inclusive. He'll come up to you when you're on the clock and just be like, "You're good with this, right? We like this guy. We want this guy to be a Seahawk." Um, and as a scout, he doesn't need that final sign off, but it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're a part of things. And um, yeah, when there's upsets along the way, it just goes back to your preparation. Not to reveal John's secrets, but he was never caught off guard. And if he was, there was a plan in place to protect against that. He always had a plan B, plan C, plan D. But it's fun, man. That's what I miss. I miss draft weekend's a blast. Those guys have a lot of fun with it in Seattle. That time after the draft, signing the undrafted free agents. They signed a couple of our senior bowlers I thought would get picked that kind of slipped through the cracks. And that's fun too, man. That's a blast of a process. So yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun, especially when you work for guys like, John and guys like Matt Berry, Trent Kirshner, Nolan Teasley, like that whole crew of guys. Really fun crew to work with.
With the introduction of underclassmen being eligible for the Senior Bowl, how different are the coming months for you and your team?
Busier. Yeah, certainly busier. I put something out on social media recently that I'll quickly summarize that tweet. But, back at, traditionally, you would go into a football powerhouse, Alabama, LSU, one of these schools, and you'd write 15, 18 players, maybe tops. That includes a couple juniors you think might come out. And usually 10 to 12 of those guys are draftable. That's a heavy workload right there, just in one school. Because if you're writing a draftable report, that's a couple hours. So if you're writing 10 draftable reports, that's 20 hours of work right there when you get home to the hotel at night. So, and then you go to like maybe a lesser Power 5 program, and you're writing maybe around 10, all the way down to like a group of 5 school. You're writing, 2 or 3 or 4. And this year in the cycle, I think we were over 30 players that our staff evaluated at Louisville, Indiana, Oregon. Trying to rattle these off the top of my head. Utah, maybe Wisconsin. I mean, so you're doubling and tripling your workload. And there wasn't enough hours in the day 6 years ago when I got out of it. There really wasn't. I mean, I don't know how these guys are doing it. I hope these owners are throwing some more money at them, because they're literally at least doubling their workload right now, their output. It's not easy. And this will be our last year through the class with the extra COVID year. So hopefully it goes back down. But this scouting cycle we're about to go into is going to be a bear, man.
The final question, I'm not going to ask you about any specific players for 2025 with it being so early, but you did post a long list of players that involve quite a few quarterbacks. I've just started sort of early looking through those players. Do you think it could be a deep class at the position?
I never say never. Yeah, and there's more than that. Like, I had some coaches text me. They were all pissed that their quarterback wasn't on there. And I'm like, I wasn't even in the office. I had our DFO took a bunch of those and just threw them on a clump and took a picture. So there's more than that. But yeah, I mean, I've already heard people in response to that. You just seeing the feedback on Twitter about that, the feedback to that, people are already banging on this quarterback class. Man, it's way too early. I mean, I know I like Carson Beck at Georgia and Quinn Ewers at Texas, guys that I know I've seen live throw before. Riley Leonard's a local guy for us. He's kind of right from our backyard down here in Fairhope, Alabama. He'll be at Notre Dame this fall. So there's a number of guys I know I already like. And then, there's the guys that have been in college football for a while that we've been watching. Will Howard, Ohio State now, who's at Kansas State with Ben Sennett, and, Cam Ward's at Miami now. So there's a handful of guys, and they're going to emerge. I mean, nobody thought Joe Burrow was going to be Joe Burrow, Kenny Pickett. I mean, there's a long line of guys that have, even Jaden Daniels 2 years ago, even last summer, people wouldn't have thought Jaden Daniels was going to be a top 10 draft pick, maybe even a day 2 draft pick. And here we are, the guy just went number 2 overall. So there's going to be some guys emerge. I think it's way too early to say that that's going to be a slim class.
Jim, once again, really appreciate your time. And again, congratulations for another very successful year for the Senior Bowl with the draft.
Well, Rob, thanks, man. Love coming on. Have a great summer. I guess we'll get together again maybe in the fall to talk more guys once we get into the class. But thanks for having me on.